All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon all, and welcome to the first of CartoPac's 2013 webinar series. Our presenter today is Glenn Vlass, VP of Sales and Marketing at CartoPac and one of its founders. Today's webinar is entitled Why CartoPac, and will be focused on giving a good overview of the CartoPac ecosystem, but with a special emphasis on CartoPac's advantages for engineering and consulting. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please go ahead and type them in chat, and Glenn will answer them all at the end. Thanks again, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn. Glenn?
Thanks, Sam. What I want to do today would be to cover the advantages of CartoPac, specifically for the engineering and consulting market. As you can see here by the slide, is that we have a pretty diverse group of engineering and consulting firms that are using CartoPac to be able to support their data collection requirements. It's not all real large organizations. We've seen that both the large companies and the small to medium-sized firms see significant benefit in being able to use the technology and have seen, I think, really an improvement of how they can address the really diverse needs that these companies have. If we start looking as far as what would be the motivation to use a new mobile solution, that can be quite challenging. So if we look as far as why are companies looking at a new solution, we touched briefly on better quality data. We looked at improved productivity, and a lot of that is going to say is that we know that it's a competitive environment. We know that we need to maximize that time out in the field. Anytime that we can look to automate a process, and we really focus on that, and we look at integrating with the other technologies like what's going on in the GIS world within Esri, what they're doing with ArcGIS Server, what they're doing with ArcGIS Online. Also working with Trimble and being able to look at automating some of the differential correction or the automated post-processing. The other thing is that we see that there's a growing demand both within engineering and consulting firms and their clients to be able to establish a common operating picture that shows work in progress and being able to provide a website that clients can log into, see the progress on the project, and be able to see the types and quantity of data being collected. We also get from a lot of these firms is that there needs to be a high level of flexibility, and that certain tools don't have that level of flexibility to be able to meet the diverse requirements coming in. We see the projects being approved. We see that going to the project managers that are integrating with the GIS team, and really is that they need to have a very flexible set of tools to meet those diverse requirements. Some of the barriers is say, great, I'm motivated and I want to look at changing the mobile technology that I'm using. What are some of those barriers still to adopting that technology? And we know that cost, and especially cost of buying licensing, buying large server components, buying all those different things at the very beginning of a project as a capital expense really is a not feasible. We do hear quite often that what we're doing now is good enough, but we're also hearing, and some of our client base have come to us because they have lost projects because they're not able to stay competitive with being able to have that common operating picture and maximizing the productivity of the people in the field. We know that there's some entrenched technologies that are out there, and there's knowledge on using that, and sometimes people will use the term, well, at least that's the devil we know, but there's been a significant investment in that, and you need to say, well, great, if I'm going to bring on a new technology, I've got to be able to engage and learn that new technology pretty quickly. The other thing is time. And we know that utilization rates are key within the firms, that those rates are can be a real challenge to meet those goals, and it's hard to meet those utilization rates when you're looking at implementing a new technology. If it's not being able to be tied to a specific project. So let's talk a little bit about the CartoPac components before we jump into a demo here. And if we look at the, here's what we call the CartoPac ecosystem, and it has the components of the CartoPac technology listed. Core to this is the CartoPac Mobile, and that's the software that works on the Windows mobile device. The platforms that we currently support are Windows Mobile and Windows 7 and XP. We also have development of being able to look at some of the consumer devices being able to work within the Android and the iOS environments as well. This is a disconnected workflow. We can do very high accuracy GPS data collection. We can support more of what I'm going to call an inspection level of accuracy, and we've even done some completely non-spatial applications like in a refinery. If we look at the server, really that is integrated with Esri's ArcGIS server. It has the CartoPac components that allows field users to download their projects to the field, be able to seamlessly upload that data, and be able to have access to some other tools to maximize the value of that data once it's collected. Sometimes those ArcGIS server deployments can get quite large. There can be quite a bit of data, and it becomes more of a corporate system than it does a field user system. So we have a technology called CartoPac Portal that is very much field user centric. So it's just the data that's relevant to the field user, the tools that are relevant, and it's a portal into that larger server deployment. CartoPac Studio is the tool that we use to build these solutions. And if we were to say, if we look at the firms that are successfully using CartoPac, CartoPac Studio is one of the key enablers for their success. If we understand that there's a large number of projects, there's diverse project requirements, that level of flexibility of being able to say, here's my workflow, this is what I need the technology to do, CartoPac Studio is a huge enabler in that technology stack. CartoPac Studio supports both server deployments and also desktop deployments. We see that oftentimes projects, at least in their initial phase, or even projects for their whole life cycle, really do not warrant being put up into a server environment. And so our extension does work inside of ArcMap and allows field users to upload, download, be able to interface with the GPS differential correction, and configure the solution. And on top of this, we also have our professional services team, which is available and works with a lot of these firms as part of the project team. It's very easy to engage our professional services team. We're experts at building mobile solutions and really trying to maximize the value of the technology. We also help a lot of organizations with integrating with existing technologies or processes to really get the job done. So what I want to do is I want to jump into a technology demo here where we're going to go through an example, and I want to just give a high-level overview of what the demo is, because I think it's very consistent with what we see within the engineering and consulting firms for a typical project. What we see here on the screen is for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's their requirements for defining wetlands, specifically in the New England district. And that's a large document, but it says if you're out there mapping wetlands, you have to define their function and values against a standard set of requirements. They have examples of the forms that they're wanting to collect the data against and how data needs to be submitted back to the Corps of Engineers for approval. This here is looking at this form as far as if it was going to be done paper-based, but they also have examples of how they would like it to be done within a digital or a repeatable format. We see here is that there are data collection forms that match those requirements in the wetlands function and values form. And we're also able to start adding some intelligence to these forms to better get to collect the data and add some spatial integrity to what's being collected. Once that information is collected, We want to automate that data coming back in, and instead of manually creating the report, to be able to generate it digitally, export it out to Excel, and ultimately submit it with the project. So I'm going to shift gears here, and I'm going to open up a CartoPac field server, and it's a very basic Esri ArcGIS server implementation. We see over here on the side we have our wetlands database, and over here on the top here is we have options to be able to download, upload, clean, and be able to other options for managing the data from a field user's perspective. I can zoom in and zoom out here in an area, and let's say that we're focusing on wanting to do some wetland mapping around Roland Moore Park. All the field user has to do is come into the office or anywhere they have access to the internet, connect their mobile device up, and say, great, this is the area I want to take to the field. It says, what solution do I want to take? Many users have multiple solutions. And let's just say, what is the name of the project on the mobile? Is we're just going to call this Wetland 2. I click on OK. On the server side, that goes ahead and processes a request, generates a package of information, and it says that data is ready to download to my device that I have connected. In addition to the ActiveSync device, which is really going to be Windows Mobile, we can also go down to a tablet, and we can also send projects through email. So I'm going to click here and say Send to Device, and it brings up a technology that allows us to say, I'm taking that component from the server, and I'm going to install all the necessary components on the mobile device. Field user really had to do nothing other than connect their device, click download, and that project now is successfully on the mobile device. So I'm going to click on OK, and I'm going to open up an emulator here that shows shows the screen on the mobile device. So once I have this, I can click on here and I say Start. I'm going to go ahead and launch the mobile technology, CartoPac Enterprise. This is opening the project, and from a CartoPac perspective, the project would be reference data, would be the forms, would be the database schema, and the rules that were defined. Going to keep track of who's collecting this, and so I guess it's up to me. So we see that we have that reference data around Roland Moore Park, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we can start seeing the imagery associated with that area. That imagery was pre-processed using some CartoPac technology components called CartoPac Imagery Studio, and allows us to have very large raster data sets on the mobile device. If I was out in the field, I would turn the GPS on. It would show my position in the screen. Since I'm inside the office here, I'm going to do this just by digitizing on the screen. So I'm going to click on Add, and the only thing that I can add here would be a wetland GPS point. Click on New, and I'm going to digitize something here by this diamond and say that is the wetland where I'm at. And it brings up the data collection forms associated with it. Now these forms are driven very specifically off of those requirements from the Corps of Engineers. So I have my project site, I have my wetland ID, and we've been able to go out and grab information here and do some spatial queries to automatically populate. For example, this is in Larimer County, Colorado. Okay. I have a lot of information I could enter, so it's tabbed across the top here, and I can also add some intelligence. So is the wetland disturbed? If I click on here and I say no, then I can continue through my workflow. If I click on here and I say yes, the wetland's disturbed, it's going to ask what type of disturbance was it, and we'll just say that it was a flood. We've collected that information. I can keep working through the tabs. One of the requirements in the forms is to be able to say, I would like to know the area of the wetland. So I can click on GPS, and I can capture an additional point associated with this wetland, or I can capture an additional area. I'm going to click on Add, and let's say that I'm out here walking the boundary of this wetland, and I have my polygon that I'm defining out here in the field. I say Done. It calculates the acreage for that. It's 22.0 acres. And then that now is stored within the application. One thing to note here is to collect that polygon, I did not have to leave my workflow. I didn't have to leave my wetland point feature, go out, map the wetlands, and come back in. So part of the workflow defined by the requirements is to identify the principal function of the wetland, and we can select this from a lookup table within the database. And then we need to go through specific components here. So for groundwater recharge and discharge suitability, does this apply to this wetland? And I'm going to say no, yes, it does apply. And I need to give justification of what needs, of how, why I chose that answer yes. I'm clicking on Add here. Now in the field forms is that you don't have any description. You just have to have two documents out there. One would be the description, the other would be the number. Here what we do is we're able to say I have both the description, and if I select it, just the number is what gets loaded back to the database. So I'm going to tab through here and see what the requirements were. And let's say I have one on tab 3 here, and I'm going to click OK. I can continue through this, and you can see that there's a lot of granularity associated with this. All the other functions that are there. I can also say I'd like to collect a photograph. So let's see what the weather's like here in Fort Collins today. I'm going to click on the camera icon, which is going to launch the camera. We're going to look out the window here in the parking lot and say, you know what, that's where we're at. I'm going to take a photograph, and that's going to get stored directly in the database. Now it's going to bring up a message for me. I'm going to give the document a name. We'll just call it Photo 1. And it's going to say location from the GPS is needed, but it's not available. What do we want to do? So if the GPS was on, we would be geotagging that photograph and being able to enter the lat-long coordinates. I'm going to continue with that and not get that populated. I go ahead and try to exit out of the forms and say that I'm done, and it says the wetland ID entry is required. Please enter a value. And I say, okay. That takes me all the way back to where the wetland ID is, and let's just do it as 5678 is the wetland ID. So we can enforce rules that the data collect that we need from a reporting and a management perspective has been collected. At this time, I click on OK. I have my wetland point, I have my polygon, and I have completed the data collection process. So I'm going to click on here, click on File, Exit, and I am done, and I'm going to save my changes. Once I'm complete with this, I would come back to an area where I could have access to the internet. I would log on back to the server application, and I would say I want to upload. I would like to pull that data off of that mobile device and bring it back up to the server environment. I said that our project here is Wetland 2, and I'm going to upload that from the device. It grabs that information and brings it back into the server, and I've been able to pretty much fully automate that data upload process back to the server. We can keep track of a lot of the details from that, from problem solving, and if you look at larger relational data models and their complexities, and we can keep track of here, but I did an area, I did a groundwater reference, and I did a wetland GPS point. So if I collect that and see what we've done here on the screen, zoom out and see where we're at. My server may have gone to sleep on me here. We'll come back to this and look as far as other options that we have within the data once that data is loaded back up into the server. I'm going to go to Projects, and this allows me to see all the projects that have been pushed down to the device. So if I see Glenn here did wetland solution, I did 3 records and it successfully merged. I want to look at those that are needing post-processing. So if I had projects that needed to be post-processed, I could click on these projects here. It would bring it, and I could initiate the post-processing of that GPS data. Our post-processing engine is based on the Trimble Pathfinder Office technology, but we can move that and automate that into a server environment. That's going to save a significant amount of time, and that's going to improve the accuracy of the data being collected. Another thing I can do here is keep track of how the data has been collected, and I'd like to know how active Glenn has been over the last month, and I want to generate a report. It looks like I've collected 39 features over the last 30 days. Here's the features. I've been heavily collecting wetland GPS points. I've only been using one solution, and here's the number of features that I've been collected. This is key in being able to track the usage of the technology and as well as kind of help with that common operating picture. I am actually going to log out of this and log back in. Wait for it to load up here. And so that we can see the data that was uploaded for that Roland Moore Park area. So I can zoom in here. I can see here's Roland Moore Park. And I can see that here is the feature that we collected here. And there is the both the wetland and the wetland polygon that we collected there with attributes collected on the form. So what have we been able to do in this full loop? We started from the server. I was able to push information down to the mobile device, collected that in a standardized format, supporting a lot of complexity, supporting a relatively robust solution. I was able to get that data back up into the server. If I wanted to improve the accuracy of it with GPS differential correction, I could automate that process. I can be able to track the usage of the system. The other thing that I can do here within reports is I can say is that what is the deliverable for this solution? Is it being able to meet those Corps of Engineers reporting requirements? How can we automate that? So up here is I have 3 types of reports that I've launched from the database. This is using, I have a spatial accuracy report that shows me the accuracy of the data, but I'm going to click on wetlands, and I'm going to select a value. And we did the bottom one here, which was 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to view a report. It looks into the database, creates that project for us, be able to populate the things, the fields here. We see that what was the type of disturbance. It says flooded. It calculates the acres at 22.08 acres. And if I want to, I dump that out to Excel. I want to make some additional changes. And here is that report in an Excel format so that now that this can get packaged up and ready to be submitted with the report. So we've seen a server deployment of CartoPac. Let's talk a little briefly about a desktop deployment. I've got up on the screen, I have my ArcMap license here, and I have the CartoPac toolbar. which here allows me to download to a mobile, upload, be able to manage the device, and have the same project settings of being able to track that. And it also has the launch for CartoPac Studio. The user workflow here is you come in, you upload, you open the MXD, you zoom into your area of interest. And so I'm going to zoom into an area here, and I want to go to the mobile device. I simply click here. I'm going to send this, instead of going to ActiveSync, I'm going to send it to my local machine with tablet. I'm going to overwrite the existing project that's there. And I've just deployed that project onto a mobile device from within ArcMap. Again, the user doesn't have to manually move any files back and forth. It's fully automated. One of the applications we talked about as far as being very powerful and a key enabler for engineering and consulting firms is CartoPac Studio. This is not going to be a demonstration of CartoPac Studio because there's a lot of detail here, but at a very high level, is from a solution perspective, everything is driven from a database. So we can support Oracle databases, support SQL databases, be able to support SQL and SDE. And so in the beginning of a project, you say, I want to add my database that I'm going to build a mobile solution for. I look at selecting those tables within that database, and then I can say, what are those properties that I want to have that database go down to the mobile device and come back up. Once that's established, then I can go into setting up the user's interface and display, and I can set up what are the properties that I want to display. So here for my, let's just say for a control valve, I have it to be blue, and I want to change the color of that control valve to a different color. I can select that and change that here within the system. This defines how the data looks on the mobile device. Then I can start building the forms, and I can say here it is that here's the database, here's the forms. This is built in quarter VGA portrait, but I can also build those out in landscape mode and in larger for tablets. And I can start saying here is the properties, and I'm going to preview that form. And here on the top you say here's the attachment and here's the form that's being built. I can see here's the property, so I click on name. Over here on the far side it shows me all the properties of how that has changed. For example, if I want to change the label on this to name to be new name, and that's added to the field here, added, and now that's the new label. If I wanted to add a control, the types of controls we can add would be adding an attachment, being able to do a calculation, being able to do a calculated area or a calculated length or perimeter. Checkboxes we often use for the status or the state of the data. We can display coordinates from within the forms back to the field users. We can do domains or drop-down lists, and we can even add some intelligence there to have multiple levels. An example would be if I'm going out into a parking lot to map cars, I can say what's the type of car out there, and I say it's a Ford. And if it asks me the model, it says it's an SUV, so I have a Ford SUV. I can never enter Chevy Silverado. I could only add an Explorer or Expedition, so we can add that type of an intelligence to the drop-downs. We can support offset measurement device. We can show collecting a picture, and we can traverse relationships. And this is one of the key advantages, is being able to go from spatial to non-spatial tables, so to go traverse a relationship within the database. Once that's built, is that we have the validation results down here. And let me just go back into this form real quick. And if I take and remove here, is that I've just gone ahead and I've introduced 4 errors to my solution by removing the bound attribute. So it tells me, it says, what are those errors? Bound attribute is required. I click on it. It takes me to that. And it says, what is that bound attribute that's going to do is we're going to assign it to name within the database. Now all of those errors are removed, so we have validation. This solution is ready to get published either out to a desktop or a server. We'll talk about this in a minute here about how you can get a better view, better insights to what Studio does. But for most of our engineering and consulting firms, Studio is a huge enabler to being able to support a wide range of requirements, being able to do so in a configuration versus a development environment. We're not having to write code here. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of Studio. We've covered the arc map, and I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint. So we went through our demo here. We went through CartoPac Studio. And you say, well, what are the type of results that people are getting from CartoPac? And sometimes it's difficult to measure, what are really the improvements in productivity. We had the NRCH, which is a federal agency. They had an application where they were having to go out and do field, crop, and soil evaluations, both on individual fields and also on multiple fields within larger ranches. From their perspective, the #1 benefit of CartoPac was being able to build these forms that were streamlined, that supported their data standards, and the ability to centralize that data into one location. How do you measure the time savings from being able to build the forms? Is we can just say, what is the improvement in the productivity on the mobile device? And they had some pretty staggering time savings. If we look at going out to a sample site with CartoPac, it was 32 seconds. They look at their technology that they were using. Same workflow there was taking 8 minutes. If we look at point intercepts, 600 seconds versus 150 minutes. So there are some very significant improvements in productivity. We've seen results from engineering and consulting firms that have said CartoPac Studio did in a very short period of time, which historically took us over 5,000 lines of VB code to do the same thing, and the performance of it on the mobile device is significantly faster. So what are these advantages? What are the tools, and what do we really focus on with CartoPac that can deliver those type of results? It is that very much the configuration versus development. Another key point in that is that CartoPac is very much, as we just highlighted within Studio, CartoPac is very much a database-centric workflow. It's database to the mobile, having the forms entering data into that schema on the mobile and bringing it back. What does this help us do? This helps us be fairly independent of changes in the GIS software, in that we don't have really any significant rework of being able to update the solution if a new version of ArcGIS server comes out. Being able to support a relational database. Most projects, most environmental projects or other projects that engineering and consulting firms are doing are based on a relational database, and historically there's been a lot of work to flatten that data and bring it back. CartoPac supports that relational database on the mobile device and really automates that, bringing that data back into the server. We saw that there was intelligent data collection forms, and those are configured. We're not writing them with code, but we saw options for being spatial queries, being able to add intelligence, being able to have the dependent drop-downs. Those intelligent data forms really do help with an improvement in productivity and are perceived as being much easier to use for the field user, because they're not having to pick through those options, they're not having to type a lot, and they can see an immediate benefit with using CartoPac. The fact that we can do both a desktop and server deployments, and the configuration of once I go from a desktop to a server, there's very minor changes in the configuration, it's really looking at what is the database that we're supporting. So I can start out with a desktop solution and I can migrate to a server. If I migrate to a server, then I'm being able to establish that common operating picture. I'm able to completely centralize the data, and I'm able to support people not having to come back into an office environment to get their data from the field uploaded back to that central location. CartoPac has also been huge in being able to automate processes, and if you're using a Trimble device and you're doing differential correction, that traditionally has been a manual process. It can take somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes per project to upload that information, get the correction made, and get it back in the database. CartoPac completely automates that process. There's a settings file that you go into and say, these are my accuracy requirements. This is when I want to run the post-processing, and it will go in, find the base stations, make the corrections, put the results back in the geodatabase, and automatically populate a set of metadata that shows how accurate that data was. Another key thing, and this is new for us, is being able to support a usage-based licensing model. Traditionally, an engineering and consulting firm would license CartoPac Studio, they would license CartoPac Server, they would license CartoPac Desktop, and then they would build a solution out to support a data collection requirement. And on small to mid-sized projects, it just really wasn't possible. And so what we did is said, we're going to provide that core technology out really at no cost, because we're shifting from being a capital expense to buy the technology to a usage-based licensing model. So you can choose to use the mobile technology by month, by week. You really specify that. You can engage with using Studio to build the solution out on your own. You can get help from us to build that solution out. We have a variety of training options to help you be successful. And if you choose to engage with our professional services group, you can do so at an increment of a half a day. So it's not like we have to engage in a long-term project. You need help with doing some advanced queries. You've got a question here. You can leverage on our expertise and get that solution to the field. These were some of the automated processes I talked about. You saw that here's the project management, or the central dashboard. This is where we automate the post-processing. Here's the database reporting and getting that out into an Excel work format, and then being able to have the key performance indicators directly integrated with CartoPac. When we talk about reporting and billing by project code, is that we said we've gone from more of a one-time licensing fee to a per usage fee. And you can set it up as that I enter my project, I say who this is being done for, who are the people that are able to use this as a solution, and it will track the usage. And so now as you're doing your internal reports to say, well, what do we need to bill for the field data collection, this allows you to have a web interface to say, well, how much data did I collect? What did I do? What was the length of time? Be able to export that and submit that to billing. So this has kind of been like a drink from a fire hydrant. And you say, great, Glenn, this looks like that there has some applicability here for what we need to do, but I really need to have I need some additional resources to help evaluate the technology. So on our website, you can make a request and get a free 30-day demo version of CartoPac Studio. Within that demo version, it is an ArcMap deployment, so you would need ArcMap 9.3 or 10. We have not yet migrated this over to 10.1. It has detailed documentation that will walk you through both the solution that's configured and how you could extend that solution to support new features. And that's going to give you a real solid feel of what CartoPac can do, and to see, is that a tool that you can leverage from. If you say, great, that looks like it's something there, but I need some additional training, we can do web-based training programs that we'll be scheduling in March, April, and May. And they're really 3 two-hour sessions where You come in and you learn about databases in the first 2-hour session and how to make connections with the database. You look at the second 2-hour session is really how to set up user interface and display, how to set up some of the other components, and really at the end of the second session, you'll be able to have full loop data going between the desktop to a tablet device and coming back. And then really the second 2-hour session is more advanced topics. We also know that there's some seasonality to this industry and that we can provide project configuration assistance. So if you have a project now where you think that CartoPac is going to have some applicability, that project's going to be going into the field here in the next couple of months, CartoPac will engage with you and to help you get that solution configured, help get that first solution up within ArcMap to the field and back so that you can see and start showing within your organization the value and the flexibility that we can deliver. So with that, I really want to thank you for your time. Many of you came here from working with our partners. Here is their contact information. If you would like to engage with that 30-day demo or talk with us about how we would engage in that initial project setup, you can contact the company that you heard about CartoPac from, or you can contact us directly here at CartoPac. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions that Sam will try to field for us from the website.
All right, thank you, Glenn. So, Glenn, I have a few questions that are asking things along similar lines here. We have one person asking, they're having challenges with large files on Nomad data loggers, and wanted to know how CartoPac handles large raster image files for background imagery onto the remote device.
So, as I briefly mentioned, is that CartoPac has a process, and I'm going to go back to the mobile device here. Maybe I'm not. What we do is CartoPac has a process called CartoPac Imagery Studio. And what that does is it uses our patented process where we take a large image set, and this needs to be in a standard image format, and we have some parameters, is that from that what you do is you input that large map set into CartoPac Imagery Studio. You define some parameters of how you want that data displayed, how much data you want to drive to the screen at one time. You want to say if I want to interface with any other map layers. We have people that will do multiple levels of map sets on the device, and you'll be able to define those parameters, process it, and the output will be a CartoPac map set. That gets copied to an SD card that would be on the mobile, and the performance of being able to interface with that imagery is the same, really independent of that total file size, because we're only loading a small subset of that at any one time. That imagery can also get loaded down into a tablet so that you would have imagery there and to be able to get high performance display and interaction with that data.
Okay, one more question. How much effort is involved with building forms for something like you showed in the demo?
It really kind of is an iterative process, is that when we're with CartoPac Studio, the process is that you define your database, you load your database, you identify what is going to go down to the mobile device, and set up those display properties by selecting the tables. You have two options at that point in time when you start to build out the forms. I have an option I can go in and auto-generate the forms, and that makes sure that all the database connections, all those bound attributes, like what I showed you of creating an error, all of those are automatically generated. So in a very short period of time, I can load my database, identify what's going to go to the mobile device, auto-generate the forms, and I'm ready to go at that point in time. But what's missing there, and this is where a bit of the art of our business comes into play, is that that is technically correct, but it doesn't match the workflows. So traditionally, once those forms are auto-generated, I need to move them around. I need to add some intelligence. I need to add some of the queries. I need to do that, and being able to get that put out into the field and get some field user feedback as far as does this really meet your requirements, and go through a couple of iterations with that. The wetlands project that we saw on a scale of complexity, on a scale of 1 being very simple, 10 being very complex, is probably a 6 or a 7. We probably have about 30 to 35 hours of work into building that form out to meet those Corps of Engineer requirements.
Well, good, and that segues right into the next question, which is, does CartoPac provide any templates for common workflows?
We do provide some templates for common workflows. We've done a lot in the oil and gas industry around pipeline and related assets. It's an area of focus of ours to be able to build these applications out to make it easier. And we've been paying attention to a lot of our customers as far as what are those solutions where they see that there's a need that many people are doing the same workflow. That wetland solution is an example of a template really driven out of what's happening up in the Marcellus and Utica Shale, and that solution is available as a template for that region.
Yeah, but we'll do one more question here. One attendee is asking, do companies typically build their own solutions, or does CartoPac typically do that piece of work?
Boy, it's a good question, and the answer, Billy, is that all across the board is that sometimes we train people with the tools, we enable them, and they're very successful. And of the companies that I showed in the beginning that were using CartoPac, I would probably say 70 to 75% of them would fit that model where they're using CartoPac Studio to build solutions that meet their diverse set of data collection requirements, and they're able to respond very quickly to what the project managers are bringing them to get done. The other part is that sometimes customers will engage with us and say, you just build the solution, here's the requirements, and I'll take that solution and put it to the field. And then we have a hybrid. We have where we work with them, we build out the solution, and they make edits to it. And we also have areas where they'll build out a solution, and they want some of our expertise and experience on how to optimize it and how to really maximize the productivity. They'll engage with us on how to maximize existing solutions as well. So again, it really fits, really what are the best requirements within the organization.
All right, very good. Glenn, thank you. All attendees, thank you very much on behalf of CartoPac for being here today. If you think of any additional questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Or if you're working with one of the partners, they may be able to answer some things too. By tomorrow, this broadcast will be available on our website for you to take a look at if you wanted to forward it along to anyone else in your organization or anyone else you know that might be interested in these topics. Thanks again for being here, and we have another webinar coming up on March 6th that is going to be a more in-depth look at CartoPac Studio and focus on some of its more detailed advantages. So thanks again.